Welcome, everybody, to another Wild Calling Wednesday. I'm your host, Jacob Sklenner, and today we are joined by Johnny Stewart, the Buckman himself. All deer in PA fear him, I'm told, but that entire region is under your stalking. I hear, Johnny, you've been doing a lot in all sorts of states here, but how you doing, man?
Doing well, I ain't complaining, Jacob. I mean, we're alive, we're healthy. What
Yeah.
more do you want, you know?
Yeah, Johnny was bragging to me. He said he might be 5 minutes late because he was pumping some iron today. So he
Yep.
said he had to get a good pump in before the podcast.
I want to look good.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm getting older and I need to get in better shape.
Oh, you
I've been I've been doing some hiking too, getting my legs ready for these mountain bucks.
well, you've been finding
And
sheds too.
yeah, I did pretty good this year. And I went out with the mindset of scouting for next year, not shed hunting. And I turned up probably a dozen horns, good deer, probably five of the just in PA, five of the six deer that I were hunting last year. So I feel like I'm gonna have a good chance this year. So yeah, I probably won't kill one. When you think you got a good chance, I'm ready for the season. I got all my scouting in, and it'll be end of November. You're like, damn, I didn't even pull my bow back. you
Yeah.
know.
It's funny, man. I'm fully expecting a season like I mean I worked my ass off again this off season, but I'm fully expecting like it seems like after you have a good year too, like you feel like, oh damn, I'm due for a bad one now. Like like I always worry about that or it's funny you mentioned like whenever I'm shed hunting, like actively shed hunting, I don't find any. But whenever I go out
Yeah.
and I'm scouting, I'm like I'm not gonna look for sheds. I'm like, oh there's one, there's another, like and I just get off my mission.
Yeah, I did that this year, just scouting your places for next year and picking up horns. But it's weird. Like right before the season, I'll kind of get butterflies, like because I don't care how prepared you are, Jake. You have no idea how the season's going. Like or the place or the deer you think you're hunting, you'll be a 180 hunting somewhere else because something happened or you missed him or this or that or he died or you know what I mean or what. It's just crazy how the season. I don't care how hard every day you scout cameras. That's what's great about it. So prepared, but still you have no clue what the outcome is. It's so weird. It's there's not much, you know. I still though are happy with the season if you put all that effort in and you don't kill nothing. It's like I hunted hard and I worked hard and maybe just like wrestling or something and you train and you still lose. You're like, you're down for a minute, but it's like I did all I could. He's better, the deer are better, smarter. But so that's kind of how I look at the season. I did all I could and that usually at the end of the season I'm kind of happy even that it's over because I'm working hard and it's like time for a little relief. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's why you're such a killer too, and you kill in a lot of different situations too. Is you're constantly adapting to the variables that come into play, and I think everyone goes into a season with a different plan, and then they get punched in the mouth by a buck, and they think it's over, and they either got to stick to it or adapt or grind through or change plans, and I kind of had that last year before I got my buck, and I just think that it's kind of changed the way I've scouted too. I don't know if you do this, Johnny, and I know we're talking into tactics here, but I can't help myself here. But I've been I've been scouting for a buck this year that I know a lot of guys know about, and it's a really really special deer and a well known area, and I'm scouting more so to where he's gonna adjust to, because everyone knows where he goes to eat. Everyone knows where he daylights most often, and everyone knows um, just generally where people are getting pictures of him and where sheds were found. And I've started actually scouting to find where he's going to bump to when that pressure happens. So I'm maybe going to put one sit in that common area to see if I can catch him unpressured in the early season. And then I'm
yeah.
going to actually shift to an area that I just think it's impossible for someone to hunt unless they were on the ground, and try to kill him there. And I don't know if you do that at all, but I figured, I mean, I can't talk to Johnny Stewart and not talk about a little bit of tactics. So, do you ever scout for that? I know, I don't know how much pressure you're dealing with, but
Yeah, a lot of pressure,
right,
I call kind of my areas or I just kind of in the last few years kind of categorize areas that these bucks go to as their safe zones. I mean, no rubs, maybe beds, but just once you feel the pressure here, um, and where all the scrapes and rubs, maybe the majority of the deer population are here, and just there's a lot of good hunters out there reading sign and hunting sign, and access, and you get these old deer that come to there at nighttime or just know what's going on, don't even hit scrapes, you're just like a satellite in the area, and you put all your time in cameras and you're not getting them. Then you started picking up, you know over years, that these older deer, I just call them safe zones that they inhibit, and it might be 50 acres, it might be 5 acres. There, you might not see any sign, but you just kind of start, and as the old deer get older, they do kind of shrink in these safe areas that they live in. You know what I mean? And if I can find them areas, like you said, there may not be a lot of sign in that, but he's safe. And I even try to get my, you know, cameras on video, and when you catch them moving, their demeanor is like they're totally, could be 9 o'clock in the morning. They're not, feeding. Maybe it's a scrape, or they're just. It's almost like they're going about their business and not. They let their guard down, and that's what they want to do. So there's these safe areas that they go to. Might be 1 acre, you know, um, 10, 20 acres, but they could be just kind of sigh of relief. So I mean, it could be coming all different types of safe zones, maybe a steep hill, or, a thicket, or like maybe somewhere you're looking at a swamp. But that's, yeah, how I kind of categorize it. And you know, it's usually in an area that nobody pisses with.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's funny because this area that he's in right now. I would categorize as a safe zone, and it just
Mhm.
so happened that the one guy that found a shed likes to talk, and it's not much longer a safe zone. So my goal is to, hey, what situation worked for him here, and how is the nearest, like, what's the next closest point that, if he still wants to access this at night, where is he going to hold up during the day, wait for the hunters to move out, and then move in? Because he'll still move in there. If he really loves that area and he's an old habitual buck, like, he'll still move in there. Um, but yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I mean, exactly like you said, lack of sign. There's beds all over the place. There's poop all over the place, so you can tell, like, it's a habitual area where they're bedding, because they often stand up and then relieve themselves and then pretty much just bed back down during the day. Um, but
Yeah.
he's not like rubbing a whole bunch up, and it's really because there's only one room for one buck there, and he doesn't really have to tell any other buck to piss off because he's kind of the kingpin around that area. You know, the hot stuff. But um,
Yeah. Real quick,
yeah,
Jake, this area that we just talked about is the beaver pond that I found this spot last August. There was a south facing slope with a good browse, 3-year-old cut, select cut. And I just threw cameras in there in August and found deer feeding. And just further up the hollow, the wind went up the hollow, and I kind of figured they were up in there. And down below was a beaver pond, but I couldn't, like, from the south slope, it looked like a dried up beaver pond, big grassy area. And my thermals were pulling down there. And I said, I don't think he's down there, but on the north slope, just across the hollow from me, there was little thick patches. And later in October, I made my way down there just to probe around, and there were scrapes all around it. But I think he was there early October, and when I was hunting that south slope, he might have been on to me. And fast forward here to February, I found his horn on that south slope, and I'm kind of hoping that he hangs out around that beaver. Oh, in that grassy area down there. All his buck beds were there on the back. I think at night he just lays out in that open. But anyways, I'm kind of looking forward to this year. Like, I'm saying, he smelled me on that south slope. And the thermals were pulling right down to him. I feel like this year. So I got cameras down there the other day. And I feel like this year he's probably going to set up and wait. He's going to expect me to be hunting that south slope again, but he wants to know, you know what I mean? So I feel like he's going to be hanging around that beaver pond, maybe more so this year, until he catches, like, yep, that guy's back. He's hunting here. But I feel like, um, so I'm going to try to hit him off down. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but get down near that beaver pond, maybe before light or something. But um, I kind of like maybe that guy finding a shed, or, someone um, hunting an area. He last year he wants to know that that person's hunting again, like me, wants to know that I'm going in there again. So I feel like he's going to spend more time there to hunt me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I
So
gotcha.
almost try to use that to my advantage. I didn't know what my plan of attack is yet, but I kind of like the fact that he smelled me there last year, and he's going to be setting up down there, waiting, 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 and then hopefully I'll be maybe in a tree above him, on the backside of that beaver pond. So
Yeah, I should show you this map too, because it's like it's not the same situation, but like the way you're describing it sets up kind of similar. Um, is that Beaver Pond one of the only like water sources in the area?
um,
There's
it's
probably
a
a creek if it's
stream.
a beaver pond. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a creek, and on the south slope, it's kind of open with a lot of sunlight because they cut it. But if you go it's an east-west creek. But if you go east on that south slope, it gets into some mature dark timber, and there's some springs in there. I know they were hanging out there too,
Hmm.
you know. But definitely, yeah, a couple springs further up the hollow. But yeah,
Yeah.
the water key. Like I mean, well, probably where you're on, there's a lot of water, but you
Well,
know,
that'd be a good situation when I hunted the hills. Like, a lot of those like lower areas, you could step down after a hunt and work out through that bottom, and you'd cross basically where that tree line is leading up into the river or the creek, and it'd be like 20 degrees cooler, 15 degrees cooler, and you could like almost feel it like a wave when you hit it. And then a lot of times in that early season, it's kind of the same thing late, especially that dark timber, or if you get low pines or something like that, or just really, really shaded overgrowth. I have them like on high wind days. It's kind of like a windbreaker for one, but also really shaded. So like I'd have them on a mix of days where if it was really cold out and really windy, I'd have them in that cover, or if
yeah.
it was really hot out and very stagnant, I'd have them in that cover. And they'd kind of hug that creek on those hot, stagnant days because that creek would be natural thermal draw. Like no matter what, they're getting a little bit of a wind advantage just from the thermals. And then at the same time, those south ridges have a really, really steep um, or really drastic thermal pull when that change happens. And so that shaded cover obviously gives them change, but when you have that sun finally light up that south facing ridge, you get a crazy thermal sucking up that ridge. So I feel like he's probably getting old because he's finding a way to have the advantage of maybe that dark timber to keep him cool, and then also that crazy thermal draw. And obviously, early season lines up with that. But that's cool, man. That's a really cool scenario. Maybe we'll have to have you on again for when you kill that buck in early
I hope
October.
so. Yeah. And now them deer, like where you talk, like out in the swamp, do you think they feed much during the daytime? Is there food right around where, like if they're, like early, I'm talking like early October, like is
Hmm.
there, or they just kind of starve and like shoot our cut, or do you think they're moving around browsing, like I'm talking like noon to 5, like
Sure.
the warmest time of the day?
So, um, I don't want to give too much away about the spot, just because of it. I know probably 20 guys by first name that hunt this property. And it's sub 4,000 acres, which describes a lot of the properties in my area. But it's easy for them to find out where I'm talking about if I mention too much. But everywhere in cattails around here, there's jewelweed, there's stinging nettle, there's all sorts of stuff for them to browse on if they just stood up in their beds. So they could browse and you'd never know it, unless
Yeah.
there's a couple scenarios where I've actually been in sight of the buck's bed and I've watched them stand up, eat jewelweed, sometimes even willows, which is a little odd, but stinging nettle as well, and then just sit right back down. And it's not and then there's also a food source you can travel to, which is not very far away as well. And there's a couple early season food sources and even late season. And what's interesting about this too is like this. There's different kinds of sign laid down in early season when they just stand up in their bed, browse, and then sit back down. There's often certain kinds of trees that they rub around here when they're bedded in the early season. Um, Sometimes in the early season, it's still flooded out decently. It hasn't kicked back and absorbed very well, so they're on a little bit higher cover. And sometimes you can see that browse sign all around. And there's a stark difference on this type of cover for early season rubs versus late season rubs because it grows mildew rather quickly. Um, so luckily, that sign he's leaving, the very little amount of sign he's leaving in that area that I think he's going to adjust to is really, really indicative of early season. And the food sources around it are telling me it's early season. But what's nice is when that stuff in the cattail starts to dry up and die, he is going to have to travel that mainland. Um,
Yeah.
so even if I'm a bit off, I think I could still get on him.
I know like my areas, I'm keying in on early season. I catch them like in select cuts, and there's a lot of daylight. You're going to catch them there like the end of September, maybe the last hour. 40 minutes. You got a little bit of chance there, early October. But then I catch them like transitioning into some more mature timber, maybe on the edge of that cut. Just kind of chewing their cud. Then I catch them moving down lower elevation to a creek or some pines, hemlocks. But I have a hard time, and I'm talking like first week of October when it's still pretty green. I have a hard time finding out where they go and what they do in my area from like that noon. I catch them transitioning in late morning, mid morning on my cameras, but then they go down in these bottoms. I feel like, I don't, it's vast, but I like to hunt all day, but I'm just like, I go down in these bottoms and it's like no sign, it's big area and that's the thing I have a hang up with is what are they doing at noon to 5 in my area? You know what I mean? They're not moving long distances and browsing. It's hot, and I'm talking like that first week of October. It's still warm. Um, your morning and evenings, you catch them. Thermals going up or down, and them playing that and being close to that. Um, our clear cuts, our select cuts are like a food plot. So we're catching them on our way to or from that. And that's where the bulk of the forage is. Otherwise, you get into the big woods, there's not much. But
Yeah. It's funny you
anyway.
mentioned that because, like, I, so we start mid September. So, like, there's probably a lot more browse that'll be available for a while. And,
Mhm.
and, that's, I mean, I didn't think about this enough. But the length of the days in September is so much longer. Like that buck
Yeah,
staying bedded all day long is a really big deal in September. Where if you get to November, like it's 3-4 hours shorter. Um,
yeah,
that's a really really good point because I mean that midday movement. I mean is definitely a thing during the rut. I mean of course they're moving during the rut, but you think about from a from their gut function, how their organs work. Like they actually have to stand up to digest and poop and do other stuff, and they may choose to roam during that period. And I feel like I saw that a lot more in the hills than I see it in cattails. But I think part of the reason I don't see it in large swamps is because you can't see them move. Like the cover is
yeah,
11 feet high. Like
yeah.
um, that's a really really good point though, Johnny. I gotta think about that more because that's a. I mean, I've thought about. There's some areas where you slip into a bedding area early season, and if they're not there, they could be 30 yards away and you wouldn't know it. And
Yeah.
I feel like you could get them to shift midday when they have to stand up anyways.
Yeah, I got this one deer, a different deer, a big old buck, and I catch him. I found his bed, so I'm going to hunt the edge of the cut. Maybe get her way before light, and it's on a downhill of the cut, and the thermals, before light are pulling, and he's up in that cut. Found his beds in October, like just only 100 yards in, and I catch him moving down the hill, late morning on these couple beds, and I'm talking like a huge hillside. So it's not just like he's not even using trails, but it's like, man, I'm gonna go down and hunt low. There's springs and it's just, but it's like a jungle. It's like I can't. Maybe I'm wondering if does he have one bed down low? Is he down? There's hemlocks down low. Is he laying down there? Or is he a little higher in the where the foliage is? There's some springs. A little bit of food. It's like, and I even went through there, in October during the season, tried trouncing through all that, even though he might have been down there somewhere just to find, just to know that, hey, that he's hunting, he's laying in his one bed, but you drop down from that top away from that cut and the sign disappears and it's huge and it's thick and it's like, because I like to hunt a deer at like, noon, 1, 2, 3, 4, before I get set up for an evening hunt, but it's just like, I can't find they're not leaving enough sign, and I don't know. It's just it's like maybe that safe zone they go to, and the sign ain't there. You know what I mean? But it might be 20 acres, it might be 40 acres. So it's just dealing with big woods, it's tough. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, I mean, yeah, it's hard because they don't have to travel, especially in the early season when stuff's green. Like they just eat so much different stuff. Like, of course they're gonna want a white oak or something like that, but like, I mean, they can eat any amount of nettle
browse.
or yeah,
Yeah.
they could browse on buckthorn or I mean maybe not buckthorn, but I'm trying to think of the word. God damn, real nasty thorns, bunch of different varying size. What's it called?
Yes.
Really green leaf. What?
Lo- Locust.
Yeah, yeah, they can. I mean, they can eat honey locust for sure. That I can't think. Greenbrier. They can eat greenbrier. Plenty of.
Hey,
Yeah.
our big thing here is just blackberry briar.
Oh yeah,
That's like
yeah.
that's a huge. And I find and then clear cuts. That's all I look for. Maples,
Yeah, I was gonna
maple
say
sapling browse. Yeah.
maple saplings. They even eat maple leaves here, right when they turn and they drop. They eat maple
Yeah.
leaves if not stuff's in around. It's crazy how much stuff they can eat. So like, you
Poplar,
know,
poplar. Yeah, you can go.
you
They
can
just
have their
vacuum
bedding
up.
down and they can stand up in the bed, travel 20 yards and eat for the last hour of the day, and you'll never see them. You know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang, gosh, dude, I'm just getting jacked up for deer season now that turkey's over. So like I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go out there, get some more poison sumac all over me, and just
Yeah.
dive back into those swamps, man. Um,
Yeah.
but all right, our audience, if they came here for a
Okay.
story, they better know me. They better know that tactics are coming up either way. But
Yeah.
Johnny, we've got some crazy stories in queue here for you today. You were talking about um, essentially living off the land almost is what it seemed like out in Iowa, and I was really interested to hear this from you. And I know think you purposely didn't give me too much of a preview because I want to absorb these organically, just like the audiences, and maybe answer some of their questions for them too. So, go ahead and shoot off. Kind of give us a place and time, and when was it this happened, and what stories are you thinking about telling here?
So probably 12 to 15 years. I don't know, in that range. I got a Iowa tag, bow tag. We had hunted uh, Iowa previously. A buddy of mine grew up there, and he was big into pheasant hunting. We went out there to pheasant hunt, and there wasn't much timber, so we had like a combo hunt. And but we had gone back once in the future from then, a few years, we'd gone to a better zone, and um, fast forward 3 years after that pheasant hunting, that I got my bow tag for the zone, and it was summer, September, and I'm out here in PA. I worked for a guy then, did excavation. We were putting water line in. I remember it was like, and I told him I was going to go to Iowa. And I kind of, when I worked for that guy, I told him I'll work all summer, do whatever you want, long hours, but I have to hunt. And he was okay with that. I said, like, well, when? I said, I don't know. Whenever it's time to go, you won't see me. Like a switch will go off and I'm gone. So like I get off the machine. So I remember we were working in an area, and um, it was a rural area, and I've seen this big buck rub, and it just Jake the switch hit, and it was probably first, second week of October, a little cold spell, and I think I told the guys, I said, we got caught up to where we were. I said, I'm leaving. Where you going? I said, I'm going to Iowa. I got to go. I got my tag. I have to leave, But anyways, I had like I don't know if it was a 1990 Jeep Cherokee, um, and had a border collie. He kind of went everywhere with me. Even at work, he would sit in my pickup truck, but um, when I headed to Iowa, he was my partner in crime. But yeah, so I was at work one day, and that night I packed up um, my Jeep and put all my hunting gear in, and I had, I think, 8 cameras. And back then, that was like, people were like, "Whoa, you got 8 cameras, man! You're crazy! I ain't never heard anyone that had 8 cameras." Now we got 40 or whatever, but that was a lot. So I didn't have. Spartan Forge, didn't have no mapping apps. I had my buddy, my buddy got drawn too. Also, he got drawn, but he wasn't coming out till the first week of November, right? And we had a hotel booked or a room booked for the first week of November. And I told him, I said, I'm going to go out early. Um, I'm going to scout, put some cameras out. And we had, I remember meeting over his house and we had run off maps. So I had like a whole folder of pieces of state land, topo maps and maybe a big atlas or something. I can't remember. I think I might have had Google Maps on my phone, for directions. But yeah, and I didn't have a lot of money then, but it didn't matter. I just wanted a deer hunt. So I remember before I went out, I had shot a doe. We were allowed to doe hunt here in PA, and I made jerky out of the whole thing. So I went to Iowa with a big bag of jerky and a dog and my bow and clothes.
That is all you need, man.
Yeah. Not a lot of money, very little money actually. So I told my buddy, I said, I'm gonna head out. I called him on the way, working one day, heading to Iowa the next day. And he's like, "Where are you staying?" I'm just like, and I had a down sleeping bag. I said, "I'm just gonna sleep in my Jeep wherever." I bought one of them solar showers, you know, to get washed or whatever, and my bag of deer jerky. So, yeah, like the first 2 weeks of October, looking for deer, um, and just moving to different pieces of public because of the EHD. And in around the end of October, I kept trying different pieces of public. Maybe have a camera or two to drop, but still have a couple soaking in other areas. And I went and hunted this one piece of public. I saw there was some private land to the north, and it was supposed to be a pretty drastic change in temperature. That night it was supposed to be like 15. And so I parked at a piece of public parking spot, and I went back in the timber, and still I wasn't impressed with what I seen there. But I hunted that evening. Probably it was probably in around Halloween, maybe just before then. And I come out to my car, and there was someone parked in my car, my Jeep, and here was the farmer that lived there, right? And it was dark. He said, "What are you hunting?" I said, "I'm looking for, deer hunt." He said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "I'm at 170." He said, "There ain't none here. They shot them all." It was a farmer. I'm like, he said, "Yeah, they're not, I'm like, and I didn't see a lot of big deer sign. So he was harvesting, beans or corn or whatever. And he said, stop up the house. His house was right on top of the hill. I'll show you some of the deer I shot here and over the years. So I went up to his house and went in. He gave me a beer, and we're talking deer. He's a deer hunter too. So, and he randomly talks to guys because that public land's right there just to see, and since it was just me, it wasn't like he invited like 5 dudes up to his house. You know what I mean? He said, "Come up, we'll talk." So we get to talking, just like, any other deer hunter you run into is passionate about deer hunting. You just keep diarrhea them out, telling deer hunting stories and how, da, da, da. And his wife had come home, and you know, he's like, "This is Johnny. He's from, oh yeah, he's hunting here. Where are you from?" Because they, see people from all over, going to Iowa. "I'm from Pittsburgh." "Oh yeah, you're out here hunting. Yeah." And "You want to stay for dinner?" I'm like, "No, it don't matter. I don't." And his wife's like, "Where are you staying at?" She's making dinner. I was like, we're up the road."
In my truck.
"Oh yeah, we're at up the. I said, "Well, I just pull off the road and sleep in my Jeep." She stops me like, "What? You're crazy. It's gonna be 15 and now you can't sleep in your Jeep." She's going on and on, and her husband was there, and me and him keep talking, and she's making the dinner. "You're staying for dinner." I'm like, "All right, whatever." So we have a couple beers, and she said, she's like, "I can't believe you're sleeping in your Jeep." I'm like, "I mean, I don't have much money to I'm going to kill a deer. Da, da, da. So I stayed for dinner, right? And it was getting late, and you know, she didn't want me. She said, "You can't go. We got a spare room out here in the mud. Like you can go stay here." You know what I mean? I was like, "You sure? Yeah, just you're crazy. It's gonna be 15 degrees. Stay here." And I told my buddy's coming out in a week or in a couple of days, and we got a place to stay. Da, da, da. She said, "Well, you come back. Let me know how." And they were so nice. Um, Stop back anytime. And I was hunting all like within an hour and a half, and they're all over. And so I stayed there that night, and I went about my way. I left them a note, "Hey, thanks um, for letting me stay." And but they said, "You need anything, stop back." Right. So I go about my ways, and I like I said, was trying different areas, and like I said, maybe right after I left them, or in around that time frame, is where I found some big deer sign. Not there, but maybe 45 minutes away. And I had a good feeling about this spot. And so I hunted there, and I saw two good deer, a 145-inch 10 or a 9, and probably right around 150-inch 8, right? But my goal was 170. So I didn't shoot them, but I knew there was a bigger deer in the area. So we're getting into November now, and my buddy's heading out, coming from home, and we got a hotel to stay in. And I did uh, see a doe come in heat probably around the beginning of November, in around where the big deer sign was, probably 500 yards from. I seen him two good bucks.
And you said
And
that you think she might have been the first one too. I know we talked a little bit before this, but you think she was probably the first though coming into heat?
I think I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there might have been a straggler end October, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like there were so many bucks on her. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you were
Or
in for a good sit.
yeah, and I didn't see the big deer that made the sign, right?
Yeah.
So I had couldn't believe it. Like I was like, this doe's in heat. And I'd say it was probably the first. I'll tell you why, as we go forward. Um, and had like 7 bucks around. The biggest was maybe 140, this and that. I mean, one of the first does, one of the like right there where there's maybe one here, maybe a half mile, you know what I mean? But just has
Right.
all them bucks on on her. So
Yeah.
no luck that sit. And so my buddy came out, and his buddy, and met them at the hotel that we had, and it was nice to stay in a hotel after eating eating deer jerky and living in my Jeep.
How big
Um,
was that pound? How big was that bag of jerky again? You were saying
I don't know, probably 8 pounds.
8 pounds of dried meat. Everybody, that is a big bag of jerky. You probably coming with a bag
Forget,
over your shoulder here.
I, I forget what you get out of a deer. I forget. Like if you get 30 pounds, once you get the moisture out, it's like seven. Like it was the whole deer. You know. So I I in around that time, my oh yeah, my Jeep, the heater wasn't working, right?
Whoa.
So now, like right before my buddy got there, I had gone and seen a guy in town. I was like, "Hey, can you help me?" He was a mechanic. I was like, "Can you help me? My heater's not working. I don't know, the fuse or whatever." He looked at it. He's like, "Yeah, I have to order a couple parts." And I'm like, "All right." And so, like, I was staying in my Jeep, and it was pretty damn cold with no heat.
Yeah.
But
They get like a refrigerator when you don't have any heat in there. Like they cool you down so fast.
yeah, it was cold. So luckily, my buddy got there, and we were staying in a hotel. And I'm so focused on deer hunting that now I got a hotel. I'm not worried about my heater, because it's like you get your gear on, you go out and hunt. But I think one day, like while my buddy was there, I called a mechanic and I was like, "Did you get my parts?" Oh, I forgot all about him. My God,
Oh.
man, I'm dying out here. This is my home, man. We're talking about, I got no heat in my house. So somewhere in around the time my buddy was, I think he had fixed my heater, right? So my buddy shows up and his buddy and said, I got a spot for you. I seen a 9 or 10 and a big 8. I said, I put him in a tree. I said, go hunt this tree. I don't know if I even walked him to the tree. So he was there like a day or so. He shot that 9 point, and it was probably mid 40s. Um, so he killed that deer, and he hung out for a few days. And I don't know exactly where I was hunting. Maybe I was still kind of probing around different areas, checking cameras. Um, I think I put him in that area to kill that deer. Maybe you would have seen that big one or whatever. But so the day that my buddy was getting ready to leave, so he was there a week, right? We were hunting, hanging out, doing whatever. He's getting ready to leave. And I remember coming back to the hotel. It was the last night. And I'm coming down the road like 40 mile an hour, and this big buck jumps out in front of me, and I mash it with my Jeep. Put a hole in a radiator, belt comes off the alternator, so I like pull up the road. I'm like, man, my home is getting wrecked, you know.
Oh.
I'm on the side of the road, and I wasn't able to charge my battery at the alternator. The belt come off, right? So my battery was good so long. Dripping some water, was able to get back to the hotel. So I called a mechanic dude that was helping me with my heater, and my buddy was leaving the next day, right? Um, so I'm like, cool, I'm cool. I was like, I can rent a vehicle, have this guy work on my Jeep, and go back to living in my car wherever I might have to live. So I called the mechanic that night. I was like, man, can you help me out? I hit a deer, some front end damage. I said, just get me moving and we'll be all right. He said, okay, meet me at the shop in the morning. We get to the shop and he's like evaluating. He's like, oh, I'm not a body guy. I was like, I'm not worried about the body. I said, get, the main components functioning so I can get back to hunting. So he looked at it, he's like, man, I'm gonna have to order some parts. And so we're getting into like November 7th, right? Like prime time. And my buddy had left, and I'm in this guy's shop at like 10 in the morning, and I need to be in the woods. And so I said, all right, order the parts. He's like, okay, it'll take a few days. And it was getting like lunchtime, right? Like 11:30, 12 o'clock. And this girl came in, and she must have had some issues in life. Um, she was talking to the wall, like she was having a conversation with the wall. I don't know if she's on drugs or
Let's
what.
say you started with she had some issues in life. I thought you were gonna say she was gonna start hitting on you or something there.
No, there was
No,
something
I'm just
he
kidding.
was on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Tweaking out and stuff. And this dude, the mechanic's like, this is Sarah or whatever. And I've been helping her get on her feet and that. And she's over there like smoking a cigarette and talking to the wall. And I'm like, holy man. And so the mechanic's like, well, it's lunchtime. I'm like, oh, all right. And I'm like, I have nowhere to go. What's that mean? He said, oh, we're going to go home and eat. He said, you want to go? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I got my dog. Bring him with us. So me, him, and Sarah getting in his minivan, and my dog, Toby, going to the house, eat my house. Are you sure? He said, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're gonna have tacos. I'm like, all right, I'll go eat some tacos. So we go into his house. It's like noon, right? He makes tacos, and that lady goes upstairs. I don't think she ever came back down. And me and my dog's hanging out with the mechanic, and eating tacos. And I was like, hey, I got a rental car reserved for me. They're going to come pick me up. They come pick you up and take you to the rental place and get you your car. He's like, "What time's that?" I said, I don't know, 2 o'clock or something." "All right, yeah, yeah, yeah." So we get done eating tacos, and he was like, "What? Oh, 2 o'clock. All right." He's like, "All right." And I was like assuming like after lunch we were going back to the garage. He's like, "I like to take a nap after lunch." I'm like,
Ugh.
"All right, what's that mean?" So we go in his living room. He puts on Transformers, the movie. He crashes out. He's sleeping. And me and my dog was watching on a recliner, watched the whole movie. It's 2.5 hours, right? I watched this whole movie. My mechanics passed out, right? And then it was like two. I was like, he finally gets up. He was like, I was like, "Man, I gotta get, I was like, I gotta, oh yeah, we gotta get you back. I gotta get that rental car." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So he drives me back to the garage, and the rental dude comes, and like he picks me up, and I just let my dog like sit in a Jeep, like he like lives in my Jeep. So the rental car guy's driving me up to the rental place. It was like almost like an hour drive, right? So he's like, "Hey," um, so I get in with the dude, the rental car dude, and he's like driving back to the rental place. And he's like, "Where you from?" We're like 10 minutes from the garage. It's like Pittsburgh. He's like, "You're not from around here. You're from Pittsburgh." I said, "Yeah, yeah, that's where I'm from." He's like, "Oh, we can't rent you a car." I'm like, "What do you mean you can't rent me?" He said, "You." I said, "Yeah, Joe said he got one ready for me up there. I mean, I already talked to the guy." He's like, "No, you ain't got no major credit card." I said, "No, I just got my debit card. I mean, I got money. I mean, what do you want?" "Oh, we can't rent you a car. No, he can't do that." I'm like, "Come on, dude. What do you mean? I ain't got no. I got, you know what I mean?" And I didn't have a major credit card back then. I didn't. I just didn't.
You'd think
And
cash would
so,
be king there. Like if you could just pay him the money straight up, like
yeah, I'm like, "What do you need?" I mean, he's like, "Oh no, man." He was like, "Cereal as a heart attack." Like, I can't. He drops me back off at the garage. And the dude's shutting up shop 3:30, 4 o'clock. He's putting the garage door down. So me and my dog, we leave the Jeep there with all my gear in it. And I just take something and we walk up to the road. There's this hotel. And the lady, like, and luckily my border collie knew English. He was like a human. It's the most intelligent dog I ever met. And I was like, "Dude, you got to stay right here, and I got to go in and check in, and then I'll sneak you in the room." And he's just like, "All right." So the lady's like, "No dog." I'm like, "All right, yeah." So then once I got the room, I snuck my dog in.
nice.
So we the next day, you know, I got to go to the garage. I finally got someone back home that had a major credit card and called and had a car lined up for me. You know what I mean? So I used my brother's major credit or whatever it was, right? So I go back to the garage and the guy said, "I'll be here at like 9, right?" I was like, "All right." So me and my dog roll back to the garage and we're like sitting outside and it's like 20 degrees. Can't get in, all my gears inside. And all I want to do is hunt, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm in a big ordeal. Like, and I called the dude and no answer, no answer. So like I left my dog sit there. I said, "I'm gonna go eat breakfast." Like my dog was like a human, like he sat by my bag at the garage and I walked into town, ate breakfast. I came back, my dog was sitting there. And finally the dude shows up at like 11 o'clock. And I didn't know anybody and I needed to. It wasn't like you had Ubers. You didn't have nothing like back then. Like we barely had a cell phone or something. But he had a guy. I paid a guy. He knew a guy that could run me up to get my rental car, right? So there's a whole day, another whole day, like burned up, like November 8th, 7th, 9th. Yeah, it was like November 8th and 9th because I got the rental car. And the whole time I'm studying my maps, like my folders, maps. So drove like an hour north, got the rental car. The guy took me, come all the way back, me and my dog. So it was like 4 o'clock at night. And I was kind of dissecting this area. My buddy shot the one deer, and I seen the big sign down here. So there was this finger of it's fence row with some Osage orange trees on it, some cedars. I said, "Man, I need to go check that spot out," right? So I had to run across the sea. It was like 4 o'clock in the evening. I said, "I bet you this is where this buck's hanging out. I was kind of looking for where he was living. I think I was in on his nighttime sign, where I was hunting and this and that. So I went running across the CRP field, and I got to this fence row and some fingers and stuff on the other side, and this north south fence row. And I'm like going in, and it was windy, and I seen him. He was like probably about 170-inch 10 point, real tall and thick. And he was walking my way, and I was walking his way. And he had jumped that north south fence row. He was just, I think, coming from his bed or something, or I don't know what was going on. And so I'm like, oh shit. So I run all the way back across the CRP field, got my stand, run all the way back like 400, 500 yards, run all the way back, and it's almost dark. And I said, and I found his a big rub where he was jumping that fence. He was coming out of some private CRP and swampy stuff, and he was going in one of these fingers on a public and cedars and Osage horn. And this, I said, man, this is where he's at. So there was a low spot in that north south fence that he jumped, and a big ass signpost rub there. So I went back in with my stand, a lock on, and as I was hanging it, I jumped a doe, and it ran over. Maybe it was in a private or something, but it was 100 yards away. And then I seen a big deer, a flash of a big deer, um, and I hung this. They were kind of like out of sight, and I hung that stand. It was so windy. It was like half hour before dark. I said, I'm gonna hunt here tomorrow morning. And right when I hung the stand, Jake, like I was coming down and I seen the flash of that deer run, right? All right, whatever. Windy as hell. So the next morning, I get there at like, I don't know, an hour before light, right? And I had gone in to hunt. I think I, or no, I don't, yeah, I don't know if I went in before light or probably gray light. I think it was gray light that I went in. Um, but anyways, here's what I did. Like I got out, and I remember seeing a house a long ways away, right? Maybe 800 yards. That was, and there was a house right across the street. But I had this rental car, and my dog, he would like live in a vehicle. Like I would, oh no, that's what I do. I would go in and hunt half day, and I'd come out. That's what I would do because I had my dog. So I went in early, and I hunted. I went in, got in that stand before light, left my dog there at the car. I went and got in that stand, and it was like a south southwest wind, north south fence row, and I was like downwind of the crossing that he was jumping across that fence. And I got up in that stand before light, and about 8 o'clock into the wind, I could smell a buck rutted. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and like I sat there 9, 10 o'clock, 11, and I'm like, I bet that buck, I bet them deer, that buck was with that doe. I bet he knew I hung a stand here yesterday or watched me. You know what I'm saying? And so um, I think he jumped across the fence further south, maybe the next crossing, And my gear started turning. I said, that deer's laying in these fingers and his cedars and shit. Oh, and I found his beds right after he jumps that fence in the public. I found he was living right in, that's where he hung out, right? So I bet he jumped the fence further down. Maybe he was with that doe yesterday. I think when they ran off, I think they saw me hang a stand here, and he was keyed in on it. So that's what I did. I went out, checked on my dog, gave him food, water, let him piss or whatever. And I remember, like I always leave my key at the vehicle. And what I was doing, I was behind a front tire. I was in like grass. I hide the key under the front tire, like the back of the front tire,
Yeah.
and I just put grass over it, right? Because I never like taking it in the woods with me in your pack. You lose. I want it to be hidden, right?
It's funny because just Dan this year lost his keys and somehow on the way back found them as he was walking in Iowa. He took his keys in and dropped it, had no idea where, and on the way back he miraculously found it. And it's just, I can't imagine the situation you'd be in with it. So, is your dog in the car when you're hunting?
Yeah,
Okay.
like, and it's
It's
cold, and
cool. It's cool out. Yeah, yeah. It's no
and
problem.
he lives like, even when I would do my excavation during the summer, I would let my truck run. I would literally we put water lining up and down the main roads. We'd shut one lane down, and like he would sit in my diesel truck with the air conditioning, and then every 2, 3 hours I'd let him out. And like he'd walk up and down the road like he knew I was in a machine and he knew not to go in that lane. He was just like a human, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
border
so
collies are so smart, man. I mean, and it's
so like
3 to 4 hours in cool weather. I mean, a half day of hunting. Like if you take a whole
yeah,
half day in hunting in that time of year, it's 4 hours. And I
yeah.
mean, that's
So
nothing.
and he would literally like wouldn't like his home was like my like the Jeep or the truck back home. Like when I would go to work back home, it's like I think you he didn't want to be left like the truck. My work truck was his home. Like, he wanted to he lived in that, and then same thing with the Jeep. But so now I got this rental car. And speaking of losing keys, I lost a set in Ohio. That's a whole nother story. I should tell that one, up in the woods. But anyways, that's a good story. It's a shorter one. But so anyways, I hit him behind a tire, right? So I go back, let my dog piss, this and that. Maybe it's noon. And I go back in and I take the stand and I move south down the fence road. I find the next crossing, you know, and I got set up in a Osage Orange. And it was November 10th. And right before, you know, half hour, 40 minutes before dark, I saw that big, tall 8 point, that 150-inch 8 point. He come toward me. He was 25 yards. And I know for a fact I smelled a buck, jumped the fence into it went east into the cedars. I know it was that big one I seen the day before. Well, that 8 point, he stood there, and then I heard this big one get up out of the cedars, and here he came. I heard because he saw that 8 point. He heard that 8 point come in. He must have been 50 yards away. And he come and I had one opening, and I should have been had my arrow on that opening, but I said, I want to see the deer and know that it's him before I shoot. And that's where my opportunity had passed. Because once and he was at that opening, he was already through it. He run that 8 point off, and he stood there, and I had a shot. I ended up hitting the limb, and it deflected, hit him down, nicked his leg, right?
Ah,
Not no nothing, right? So he takes off running, right? And so I go, I mean, there's hardly any. I seen it, right? A
yeah.
couple drops, now he got 40, 50 yards. So I go back out to my car, right? It's dark. And I go to get my key under the tire. It's gone. And I'm like digging at the grass, like I know I put it there. I'm like, what?
This is your
And
rental, right?
yes, I had one key. So I swear, like the only thing I think, like I kept scratching at the grass, like it's here. It's like I'm sometimes you forget misplaced stuff, especially now that I'm older. But I was young. I was like, and the only thing I think is that guy was watching me, and I had a Texas plate, and maybe maybe he's watching me with a spotting scope. I can't. Someone took my key, or you know what I mean. That's the only thing I could think. It's gone. Maybe he took it and threw it. And I'm like, I know. Like I looked at my packing app, but I'm like 98% sure. Like that's why I kept digging at the ground. Like it's here, and I kept looking. I'm like, I know it's here. So listen, I have no key. Um, I think I leave the window down. I mean, it's cold that time of year, but for my dogs, I was able to get in my vehicle. So I call a locksmith, and they were able to come make me a key, but it wasn't until the next day, right? Like, man, where are you at? What's your address? And I don't really have an address. And so um, that night, I just slept in my vehicle, just like whatever. I have to meet this guy here in the morning. So I just stayed there at the vehicle all night. It was cold that night. You me and my dog. And I think it was like I was good till like 4 in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning. I was like, and I'm just looking at my maps. So I'm gonna go hang a stand somewhere. Like, that's when I went and hung a stand where all the buck sign was, where the doe was in heat. Um, that I seen with all them bucks, earlier in the season. I hung a stand there because I think I was using a climber. I said I should just hang a lock on because that buck, that big one, that was like, I don't know, 600 yards from where I just saw him, jump that fence and maybe he's on to me there. So I went and hung a stand down there and like 4 in the morning, seeing my dog walk down, just walk down the road half a mile, go hang a lock on at like 3, 4 in the morning or something, and come back, sleep for a little bit. I didn't hunt that morning because the dude was coming like 9 or something. So he made me a key, you know. So now I'm back in business, you know. And so I think I had by then I was like, so I went back to the farm, we met the farmer and that. And I was like, how's it going? They're like, pretty good. How's it going? I said, okay, I guess. You know what I mean? So I had my rental car, and I think when my Jeep um, got back functioning, um, I said, can you give me a ride up to, I need to get rid of this rental car, get my Jeep, and this. And they were like so nice. They stay. You can stop. Nah, nah. Come back and stay here. I'm like, you sure? And then I start telling them all my stories, and they're like, "This guy's something else, living in his car, he got no money." So she drives me, gets uh, the farmer's wife takes me up, gets rid of the rental car, get my Jeep back in action,
Yeah.
and so start hunting again. And that stand I hung, um, oh, and like I would always wash my clothes and send free stuff, but if you go to like you know, a laundromat, like everything smells like fabric softener.
Right, right.
So I think one time I went to the fabric, I went there and I took walnuts and stuff and dough and heat and I dumped it in the washer, man. Like I doused it in there.
Oh, like a
And
redneck concoction right there.
yeah, yeah, I gotta get like mainly my base layer because I've been wearing it so much. And I was washing it in the creek and stuff, but now like it's really cold, everything's freezing. And so I remember going to that tree stand that I hung, and that buck came in, and now we're about November 14th, 5th, somewhere in there. That buck had came in, and he was following that Big Ten, the 170 inch was. There was a smaller buck in front of him. They were both following a doe, and he was following that doe. And he turned and went downwind of me,
Mm.
and he picked me up like, and I could still smell the fabric softener on my clothes, right? So I'm like, he smelled me. I'm like, damn it. So I kept hunting that deer. I seen him a third time. I kept moving a little bit, just kind of in the same area. And the third time I saw him, I hunted same deal. I would come out at noon or something to check on my dog, and I got down out of my stand. Or I think maybe, yeah, I think I was a climber. I was climbing down, and I just hit the ground, Jake. And I'm like getting ready to take my bow off the rope, and I turn around. He's standing there looking at me at 35 yards.
Oh no.
So
Oh.
I unhooked the rope, I knock an arrow, right? And I pull it back and I turn around and he just walks away with his tail going like that. You just go like that. I'm like, goodness, right? So, anyways, like now I'm living with the farmer, eating every night out of deer jerky,
Hey, I was
out
gonna
of my,
say, how many pounds you got of those 8 left? You're probably all full on that.
yeah,
Oh,
no money, no jerky, no nothing. Then I said,
you
hey,
barely got a
the farmer,
vehicle that's working too at this point.
yeah. So I'm back with my Jeep and uh, the farmer was combining and he had a couple semis and he he was older, but he would take the one out to the field, which is a few miles away. It would get loaded, and he would get the truck that was already loaded and bring it back to the grain bins, And then he'd go back and get the full one, and he would just switch trucks. I said, "Hey." you need help. I mean, you guys, I feel bad. Like, no, go ahead and hunt. You only got one. I said, no, I could drive semi. I could do whatever you want. You know what I mean? You sure? I was like, yeah, yeah. So I remember the farmer took me to the field where the semi was with, you know, and I remember driving a few miles, 15, miles south to one field. He's showing me all these good hunting spots, and gets me to the semi. I got a whole load of corn, grain, beans. I don't know what I'm hauling. I gotta head back to the grain bin. Like, all right. So I start gamming, grabbing gears and heading north. I'm like, where the hell am I? Where's the farm at? I don't even remember, right? And there ain't no service. So I remember like making a couple wrong turns, and I got this semi load of corn, and I'm trying to get turned around, jackknife and turning around, and finally I get back to the farm, and he's like, "Where you been?" I said, "Yeah," I said, "took a couple wrong turns." You know what I mean? But I helped him a few times, and like yeah, my friends back home, I remember would talk to each other like, "You hear from John? You see John? Where's he been?" "Ah, I heard he wrecked his vehicle." And then the one I remember they'd be like, "Ah, he's living with some farmer, and he's I don't know if he's driving combine or what he's doing out there. We ain't heard from him in weeks." So I was living with the farmer, and so life's good, hunting deer, no money, um, in Iowa, chasing that one deer. And I think I had gone home. PA rifle is just before, no, just after Thanksgiving. So I'd gone, and it's 2 weeks. So I had drove home one time. I'm thinking like in the latter part of PA gun, maybe around December 4th, 1st, somewhere in that. And there was one big deer that lived on my buddy's property. And we're talking about kind of a rural area, some small farms, hay fields, nothing, a lot of people, a lot of hunting pressure, like a big deer is a 120. But there was this one deer that's been around for like, oh no, I heard about him the previous year. He was a 13 point, and my buddy let me hunt on it. He had like a hay field and a couple acres of timber, and he had a year before, like there was this buck crossing the road onto his property, and someone else I heard got wind of it. It was a 13 point, and I asked my buddy, I was like, "You got 13 point on your living on your property? Who told you?" I said, "That's what I heard, because it wasn't exactly where I lived. It was like 20 minutes away." So yeah, yeah, he's here. I said, I think I saw him spotting a couple of years ago. We lost spotlight in PA. So I had found like the previous year, I found one side of that deer's horn. He was like a 6-year old, and I didn't have cameras there. I just heard it was a 13 point. So the previous shed season, I found nice, probably you would think like high 40s, 10 point, right? Or I got one side of them. So I drove and I drove all the way home from Iowa, like the first week of gun, and I knew this deer was too smart for everybody. Everybody gun hunted. He's been there for years. So I let all them guys gun hunt, bow hunt, and so I went like the last couple of days of gun season, and I went back home just to put cameras out to see if he made it through. And then I come back in January and hunt him. I had one side of his horn, and so I come back, put cameras out, drove all the way back to Iowa. We're into December. I stayed at the farm, ate Thanksgiving there. You know what I mean? But we're into December, and I saw that big buck again, um, like December 15th or something. Um, in a different area. I just kept moving around hunting that big deer, and I was getting ready to get up in a tree. It was daylight, real cold, a little bit of snow on the ground. And I was hunting his food source, these oaks, and this doe jumped over this fence out of this thick stuff. And he stood on the other, like I was getting ready to set my stand up. I was on the ground, I knocked an arrow, I kneeled down. She starts feeding on oaks, and he's standing behind her, 40 yards on a dot. And he didn't want to jump out into the open oaks. He just stood there. Because by now, I think it's gun season, or gun season before gun season. Or I don't know if I can't remember. Right around either gun season was over, or it was right before gun season. So he was a little bit scared. and I was still bow hunting, and he didn't want to come out into them open oaks. And I said, man, I'll shoot him. That's 40 yards, right? And it was going right for him. And I hit a locust sapling, like the size of my finger, and it deflected down. So this is the fourth encounter I had with this deer. And then I just gave up, Jake. I was like, I'm done. I can't hunt him anymore. I quit. So I started, we're getting into middle of December. I don't know, gun season was over. And I don't know. I don't think maybe I went home for Christmas. It's been a while. I can't remember, but I remember, after Christmas hunting, and it was so cold that winter, and I had missed. I took, now I'm looking for different deer. I'm checking out different pieces of public, and we had some snow. It was good winter time, finding big tracks. So I had a camera. I found a group of some good bucks, um, and I had missed one deer. I was watching the edge of this field, and I had hit a limb another 45 yards. I took a shot at this deer out in the field. And he was like 140-inch deer, like in December, into January. And I hit a limb because the edge I was in the timber, but he would walk that field edge, and I took a shot, hit a limb. I missed this deer. So now it's just like I'm like, man, you're so down on yourself because I can't catch a break, man. This season's killing me. And so fast forward to January now. Um, and we're talking 12, 14 degrees. And I got up in a tree, and the trees were cracking. It was windy. And this group of bucks came through, and one was about 160-inch 10 point. You know, they was like four bucks. I could see them coming. Just the trees cracking and the wind. When they were on edge, they'd move like this. They were just like running, like they didn't know which way to go. And I was in like a little bit of a funnel. I said, they're coming through here. So they would like run like 20, 30 yards, stop, look around, then run 20, 30, and just like scared, right? So they run the 20, 30 yards, and they all stopped right here on the trail, like 12 yards away. And that big one stopped, and he had a tree going right up over top of his shoulder blade, right? And like right, probably his lungs, you know what I mean? And he was quartering toward. I said, I'm going to go right in front of his shoulder and aim. I said, it like barely missed a tree. I hit a limb. It was 12 yards. Hit a limb, hit him in the neck. And needless to say, it wasn't a vital shot. I was like ready to drive home like then. Look for him, never found the deer, right? So the last couple of days of the season, there was a big storm coming. I shot because I said I was going to kill a deer. That's when I'm coming home. End up shooting a spike, you know, killed a spike, and drove all the way home. I remember it was like a 12-hour drive, but the roads were so bad. I drove all the way home. Yeah, I was home the first week of December, and I think maybe around Christmas, and then now January. I was coming home for the final time with a spike that I'd shot, and I remember the interstate was closed. You weren't supposed to be on it. I didn't have. It took me 18 hours to get home, and it should have took 12, right? I drive all the way home, and I'm going to muzzle loader hunt this deer because I think, yeah, around Christmas I'd went home, and I got pictures of this 13 point on my buddy's property. He's alive and well, right? So drive all the way home, and drive. It was flintlock season in PA. January, I don't know, 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th, somewhere in that brutal cold. Drive all the way home, get my flintlock, my house, 18-hour drive to my buddy's place, right, to hunt, and the wind was like 30-mile-an-hour gust, right? I said, I can't get out and hunt in this. So I just drove my Jeep up in the field, and he had a oil well up in his field, his hay field, and there was timber up above, and below me was the road. Um, and the deer was coming from across the road, coming up in his hayfield, going up in his timber, his acorns, right? I said, I'm just going to sit here, just oil well sit in my vehicle. I left the car. You couldn't even hear it. It was running. The wind was blowing so hard. And I'm looking across the road, and there's some piece of woods, and there's field. I found his horn on the other side of the road up in that field from last year, and I knew he was crossing. And I look at my binoculars, Jake, and I'm looking across the field, looking way out there, like 400 yards. I put my binoculars down. He's standing in front of my Jeep. And I'm like, holy shit. And he had just crossed the road and he's coming up and he was going up to them oaks. So I get my flintlock and your pan powder. So you put the powder down the barrel, and then your sabot or round ball or whatever you use. Then you have your uh pan powder, your 4F that goes outside. That's what you use to spark, and that's what I forgot. That I went home and got my gear, drove 18 hours, got my gun, drove the hunt. So I had my gun, and you're allowed to have the ball down a barrel and that, and I didn't have no pan powder. I'm like, "Oh," I had my bow. So I grabbed my bow, and the deer went up into them oaks. So I run up to them oaks, windy as hell, 30-mile-an-hour wind, crosswind. And I looked, and he was down in there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll hunt here tomorrow, you know. So I go the next day, and now we're into January, I don't know, 18th, 20th. It's late. It's brutal cold. He has to eat. His guard's down. Nobody's hunting. So I go up and get in a tree with my flintlock the next day, and here he come. Like I was in them oaks, but I couldn't see down in the hayfield in the road where he was coming from, because I was like down in the oaks where I seen him feeding. So I was just kind of like sitting there watching up the hill toward where that hayfield drops down to where the road is. Here he comes, dude. The next night he come in, and he went by about 70, 80 yards. I put that flintlock up, and the pan powder went off, and it burnt, and the gun never fired. I'm like, oh shit.
Did he spook
Then
right then?
no, he just looked,
Yeah.
and I put more pin, but he kept going. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I grunted to stop him. So I don't know if I think there was 2 days left in the season. So the season ended on a Saturday. This was Thursday. So Friday was my last chance at shooting a big deer, and I've been hunting since October. And I had a year where so many mishaps with that big buck, and you're so down on yourself, but I don't give up. But I'm never, like, in my head, I'm never getting a deer. I can't get a deer this year. Just it's not going to happen. Every time I shoot, something's going wrong. So I had the Friday to hunt, which was the next evening, and Saturday was the day that closed, and it was calling for a major snowstorm, blizzard-like conditions, and I wasn't going to be able to hunt. And mind you, I didn't have Sitka gear back then. I had pathetic shoes and pathetic army camo and stuff. Just like whatever I got at Walmart or Kmart back, like my snow camo was just like cotton, like I was the man. So I was freezing all the time. And I remember being in Iowa, and the farmer, he was like, "Is that what you're wearing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's all I got." This is all I own. So I remember the last day I left the flintlock at home. I'd taken my bow, because it was a little. Now there was snow on the ground. He was hitting that trail coming down in them oaks. So I went up to where I could see down in that hayfield, and I could see they've been breaking trail. It's probably 8, 10 inches of snow. So I got where I could see in that hayfield. I got up in a tree, and I remember it was like 20-some-mile-an-hour wind, and I just kept moving my feet because it was so cold. I said I can hunt here 2 hours. And so I'm sitting there with my bow, and I'm waiting and watching for him to come up through that hayfield, and but I'm so down on myself because of the year I had, all the mishaps. I'm like, this ain't it. There's no way, because of what happened all year. I'm just like down. So I'm sitting there, and it's like damn near dark, and I'm like, well, like almost before. I mean, I still had shooting light, but it's like this ain't. I'm getting down because I rather know that what's going on. Like, no, this ain't it. Take my release off. right? And here comes these two little bucks. They come up like on that trail. I'm like, oh, okay. And they end up feeding right underneath me. And I didn't even put my release back on. I'm watching them. You're always like, "Oh, I'll wait till they move off before I get down." That's just normal. And I'm just like, got my bow hooked and my rope on. I'm just like, come on, freezing, like, come on. And I look up, here comes the big one. I'm like, oh shit, it's him. And I'm like, I got these big ass gloves on. I can't even move. I'm like, I'm trying to. And he's like, he's getting it. Boy, he's coming up through the field. I'm like, I can get my rope on, And I'm trying to put this, and he's coming. And I'm trying to unhook the bow string. You know what I mean? And knock an arrow. And he was just beelining. And I knew he was going to be on that trail. And he was just watching them deer, and he was wanting to get in the timber, the next safe area. I pulled my bow back, and I knew he was going to walk right there, and I just had my 20-yard pin. As soon as he walked in my pin, I hit the trigger, right, and I seen it go in him, and he ran out in the field,
Hey, it didn't hit
and
a
he's
limb
you
this
know,
time. Let's go.
yeah, he ran out in the field like 100 yards, and he kind of like he laid down, and I'm like, "Oh, let's go." There's 8 inches of snow, blood. I'm like, that looked like a good shot, and then I waited, waited, waited. It got dark, and I left. I come back with my buddies, and we follow it. And the arrow went down through him, and you could see the arrow was dragging and blood. And he went, and then he got up from where he's bedded, and he went in the woods like 50 yards, and he was there dead. And he was like, I don't know,
Nice.
155-inch deer.
Nice, man.
Yeah, so it ended up being a good year. And I sent a picture to my friends in Iowa. I'm like, look what I'm shooting. And they're like, holy shit, why are you coming out here if you got all them big bucks back home? But yeah, he had a typical one side, and the other side, he had something coming off his base, big long brows. He was a little bigger actually the year before as a 13, and I think he was like a 12 when I shot him. So we got him the hell out of there. And I remember. Oh, so I left my stander. I come back in March. I was done. Come back in March to get my stand. It was a climber. I come back in March to get my climber, and I said, "Well, I'm going to look around for horns because there were some deer feeding them oaks. But there was, like I said, it was all yearlings and him, and that's all that's out there. Like my buddy shoots like 110 to 115-inch deer. 2 year olds. There's so many guys and hunters. 2 year olds, they got a 4 point restriction, so the fours and sixes go by, but the 2 year olds all get killed. The 110 to 112, 15, and this guy just found out how to survive and not come out and rifle for 5 years, and no one got him. But anyways, and I'd look for his other shed. I would start like a nucleus. I started a kind of my buddy's property and just kind of last the year before, and I found the one. I just kind of went out, 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 and I couldn't find his other horn. So I had the one side. So, like I said, I come back in March after I got the deer to get the stand down, and I said I'm going to go down behind me. I'll look in these oaks, see if I can find a horn. And there was like a little swell that went down through the woods that created like a ravine, and it was probably only 7, 8 feet, of a ditch that went down through there. And I kind of head down in the woods toward that ravine, and I look and I see a log across the ravine. I said, man, it looks like horns, like on top of each other underneath of that. Like I seen tines like this, like two horns would be two sheds, racks laying on top of each other. And I looked right down that ravine. I could see it. I walked down there. It was his horn from the year before. He went down in that ditch on that log and knocked it off. And he had all kind of like double twos, and like he was bigger the year before, and it was laying there. And I remember when I shed hunted, I would probably went down one side of a ravine and just looked across. You know what I mean? I find that they knock them off rocks, or they'll knock them off trees and logs and shit like that. But so yeah, March I went there, I found his other side, so I had both horns from that buck that I'd shot. You know what I mean? But
Dude, that's
that was
cool.
yeah. So that was my Iowa story. I'm sure I left out some, but it's been so many years that I got the highlights in there.
Dude, what an
You know,
eventful story too. Oh my gosh, from the car troubles to the freaking 8 pounds of jerky you're trying to live off, the people taking you in, watching Transformers with their dog. Like, oh my gosh, dude. That is, man, I hope to have a season like that someday. Like, I mean, missed shots and all. That is so cool. And then to come back in the end and have that storybook ending on the buck. I mean, stud buck back
Yeah.
home. That is so cool, man. We
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I'm gonna have to have you on to tell that Ohio lose your keys story some point. And then
Oh yeah.
I think so. You went quite rogue last season. You were doing your own thing, and just I mean, I feel like every time I looked at my phone, you're in a new state. And I'm
Yeah.
sure with you recording content and everything, I'm sure that next year you're probably going to be doing, or this upcoming season, you're probably going to be doing something real similar. So I know our
Yeah.
paths are going to cross later in the year, so we got to share some stories coming up here, and maybe a couple Coors banquets because I know that was your
Yeah.
beer of
Yeah.
choice at
Yeah.
some
For
point.
sure.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
see if we can pump some iron together.
Yeah. I might be ready by then. I got to get up, keep working out. My old ass got to work out. Get back to fighting weight.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. Hey, I mean, if there enough Coors banquets happen, maybe we'll have to get a little wrestling match here and there. I'm pretty sure you wrestled in high school, right?
Ooh, you might regret that.
I probably would. Looking at the way that you're wrestling these bucks down, man, I gotta tell you, I'm a little timid, but dude,
That's me.
yeah, yeah. No, but honestly, Johnny, it was an honor to have you on here. I know that you're a guy that has endless stories, and people are gonna be watching this podcast. I'm just grinning like a kid in a candy shop the whole time. Like it's a blast listening to you, and I know you have endless experiences, and we kind of thought of the idea for this podcast based on people like you. Like you're a guy that could talk about tactics till the sun goes down,
Mhm.
and probably keep telling tactic stories until the sun comes back up. And there's not often enough that we ask people that are very intelligent deer hunters all of the different crazy things that happen to them. And it's kind of inspired by Dan, because Dan's got his head squared on very well when it comes to betting and tactics and things like that. And then you just talk to him in like a deer camp setting, and he's got these crazy stories that may never like see the light of day. And
Yeah.
it's just awesome to get to hear that from people, and to get to have a little bit of a deer camp outside of deer camp. So I really appreciate you being on. I really look forward to talking to you come the PA show if you can make it, and possibly recording some more of these.
Yeah, and that's where, like I was saying, that does and heat, like I learned, like, just from experience like that is how you learn things about deer, because you're always asking yourself the questions and always looking for answers and going out and scouting and asking a bunch of questions. But that buck, I think, didn't, and I learned this in after that deer, he didn't want that first doe because there was too much chaos.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be chasing bucks, running her around all over the countryside because it was November 10th. He was still nocturnal because that when I went in to hang the stand, he was just leaving his bed. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
That's a
Or
good
maybe
point.
like the does would, or maybe it was a certain mature doe that next night to come to him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, but it was like, and up till that point, I didn't see him. I think he was nocturnal. In the 10th, that not on the ninth, probably that doe come to where he was bedding. I mean, he lived right there.
Mm-hmm.
And previously, maybe the sixth, seventh, eighth, he wasn't chasing that. Like he was nocturnal. And I see a lot of these big mature deer, there will be still be nocturnal until about that second week of no. And then I seen them, in through November and December. Then it just like floodgates open. I've seen them in different areas, but until that time, and I've seen bucks in the past since then, still nocturnal, and
Mm-hmm.
waiting for them to those and not. I think it's just all the chaos that comes with that first doe. He's like, I'll get mine. I don't need to be down there chasing all the, I'm gonna stay here. Or maybe she was a young doe. Maybe he knew of the mature one, and he just knew I hang out here. She'll come find me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with
I
experiences, like you said, over the years, you put that. You don't really got to. You don't have to write it down. It just kind of gets ingrained. Something like that happens.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Like I mean, these stories are sometimes fun, sad, scary, happy stories, and they got all sorts of different varieties, but there's almost always a lesson you can take from some of them, whether it be like tactics or a life lesson or
Right.
something like that. Which is what I love so much about it. I really love taking a deeper meaning out of each podcast, and just getting the perspective of someone who went through something. Sometimes it's life changing. Sometimes it's just something that gives you a cue as to what's really going on in the woods out there. Like this buck right here, that I shot last year in Wisconsin. He was on an isolated area with does, and I killed him on November 10th actually, and he he wasn't doing a whole lot of running around
Mhm.
before then, but when he could get a doe on an isolated area where he could just walk the 10-yard circle around it and push other bucks away as needed rather than her running for miles, like then he was getting very active and not moving far, but in this local area, like he was in a place where he could easily defend that doe. And in cover like cattails and stuff like that, um, it's it's very hard to get anywhere near a buck in cattails without making a lot of racket and let them know you're there. Well, that kind of goes to their advantage for that first doe in heat, um, with other bucks coming to disturb them. And I noticed that some mature bucks, like uh, at times, that first doe that comes into heat will be the crazy anomaly, like October 20th or 18th or 22nd or somewhere around those dates. And he'll be alone with
Mhm.
that doe, but he won't move far at all. So, I mean, you couldn't even tell that doe's in heat. And he just keeps it in an isolated position. There's still plenty of browse around then. And then you see, like, all the times that people say it's like peak rut. Like, it's just a bunch of young ones moving around. Those older ones aren't sticking their neck out far enough to get killed, and that's why they live to the next year. And then do what
Yeah.
this guy did, later on in that year, which, November 10th, where I'm at's a little bit later than what you probably were hunting, is in terms of the rut, but that's pretty late in the rut around here. And he finally got one doe in a position where he could defend it, and he started using that bed. And because of lessons like what we talked about right here in this podcast and what I've heard before, um, I keyed in on that area during that time period because I knew that, like looking at this bed, it was either going to be something he used year round, which I didn't think was as realistic, or it was going to
Yeah.
be something where he could hold up with one doe and make it, this isolated root ball above the rest and defend it easily. And so, it's awesome. I get to listen to a story like this, take part in it, ask questions, and then also learn tactics that apply really well around here and in a lot of other situations.
Mhm. Yeah. Stories to me of other hunters, or I I know when I was younger, I would really young, I'd read everything I could about deer hunting, and then it just kind of didn't apply to where I hunted in situations, and then I liked just hearing like I remember when I was in high school, the girl that sat next to me, her dad would be done hunting what with the Buckmaster magazines, and she'd bring them all in for me, but it was all the stories or North American whitetail. And then I just read, hey, this happened to this guy, whatever crazy story it might be. So I'm like, it is not a tactic, but it's like this happened to this guy in this situation. So maybe, so I find sometimes you'll learn more from story of other hunters. And like your story, I remember you told me, and I'm like, oh yeah, this happened at like almost like it would happen to me. You're so particular on every little detail. And I'm like, or any hunter that tells me a story, I'm like, this happened to Jacob. This is, and I'm like, so it's almost like I was there and I put that in my memory. Like this happened to you, this could happen to me. So just, yeah, hearing stories or reading about, you know, other situations or hunts that guys had, um, can go a long way.
Yeah.
Just you can apply to your situation at some point.
Yeah, and you're constantly in that learning mode. I mean, you look at a lot of the greats of our day and age, like Andy and you, and a lot of other guys. They have success in a lot of different states and different terrains, different situations, pressure, no pressure, all that. And I feel like they're just willing to listen to anyone and put it in their memory bank, and then just at least try it out. If it doesn't work in your area, it doesn't work. Um, but not being above trying out something you hear, whether it's a story or someone preaching tactics or stuff like that. I feel like you can't get worse in the long run. You're only getting better if you figure out what's working in your areas and giving something to try. And it really only takes 15 seconds of that tactic working for you to have a year
Yeah.
that's kick ass where you shoot a booner, you know.
Yeah.
Something I'm taking away from this podcast too. Unfortunately, at the bane of you, I'm taking away to be really looking out for the cover in front of the deer that I'm shooting, making sure there's no sap. But for real, that's a really hard thing to do, especially when
Yeah.
them bucks are coming out in faded light. Like one thing I try to do is range certain big trees and get my range on those before
Yeah.
the deer comes in, and then also knowing like, hey, I got 6 inches to the left of this tree before I start to run into cover. If it's fading light and I can't pick out that cover anymore, I can't shoot more than 6 inches from that tree or something like that, because these bucks
Yeah.
usually they aren't walking in open timber, they aren't walking in that flat
Mhm.
grassland that you want to walk through. They're walking through nasty stuff that has the opportunity for deflection everywhere written all over it.
Yeah, and that first time, I mean, I don't ever cry over spilled milk, but that first time I saw him, I had that little hole in the Osage orange. It was thick. I should have been. I don't know if I was at full draw. I think I was just like, "What's coming?" I knew damn well what deer it was. I don't know,
Yeah,
but I'm just like, I wanted my eyes to tell me. I should have been in tune with my instincts. Like that's him. It should have
yeah.
been like this on that hole, and then when I seen that rack, I would have smoked him.
And I know you're
You know, and
talking
I,
about fitness a lot here too, Johnny. And one thing that I practice, and I don't want to talk about me much, but um, is hold and draw for a really long time, like holding draw until I'm exhausted, and then practicing
Mhm.
a really good shot. And this last year, and I keep talking about the same buck, but um, I held draw for 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and I didn't know it was that buck at first either. And it's like, um, if you can hold draw for a while and you can make a good shot when push comes to shove and the pressure's on, um, I always say when I'm fishing, like hook sets are free. Like if it's a rock or a fish, I'm setting the hook. Well, it's the same
Yeah,
thing with a deer coming in. Like drawing my bow is free, man. I don't lose anything by drawing a little bit early if I can handle hold and draw
yeah,
for a bit. Um, but there's plenty of times that I've been caught with no confidence in my bow unclipped, and there's the big buck I was after all season walking out right in front of me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, sweet man, Johnny, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I can't wait to do this in person sometime, and I know that
Yeah.
you're probably one of the best storytellers that we got out here too. So I'm sure we'll see you on here again.
Yeah, we'll have to do that one about the Ohio trip there, which is
Yeah.
probably shorter, but
Yeah.
I would I do now do a lot of journaling in the Spartan Forge app, but I wish I did this or wrote more down because the things people I've met and the places I've been. And I remember one year I was in Illinois hunting in a river bottom, and it was Thanksgiving, and I said I was eating at a Subway, and I said it's going to be closed when I get out of the woods, and I met an old squirrel hunter. He left I come out of dark and on my car, he had turkey dinner, like a plate for me,
Oh.
and it said he barely his writing was from the squirrel hunter. And I
Oh.
sat there and ate turkey dinner. I'm like, wow, this is great. I went back to the hotel. Well, I was just by myself. I did a lot of hunting alone, over the years, but I just wish I wrote more things down as they happened, and I probably could have a good book full of stories, you know what I
Oh
mean?
man, that's the beauty of recording stuff too. Is like there's lots of things that I haven't ever put to YouTube and probably could never put to YouTube, but I have some amazing memories out of it. And to your point, I got to start writing more stuff
Yeah, you
down
got
too. That's
yeah,
a
just
good thing that you hear from everyone that's been around for a while.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you're starting up a lot of recording and stuff, so I want to give you the opportunity to kind of share where you're putting all your new footage and things like that. Keep in mind this episode's going to be debuting maybe September, October, November, anywhere in that time frame. So, kind of share where you're making your videos and putting them out nowadays, because I know you're busting ass on that.
Yeah, we filmed all last year. I got a few kills. I think, well, I got 3 deer last year, 3 buck, 2 on film. We started editing. It's June, or we're going into June here, and I'm probably going to put my videos out, so they'll be out already by the time you release this summer, going into fall. And I'm going to film again last year. It's just going to be on YouTube, the Johnny Stewart. But I don't know if I'm going to do maybe more of a, put them out as maybe be more on top of it, not wait a year. I don't know, but um, Yeah, and I actually got some older videos. We used to, back in the day, when my 20s, I used to have the Sony Handycam,
Mm.
and I got a stack of film that I think I'm going to try to get that to Jake, and maybe I get that to my buddy, and he edited those, and put them out going forward. Just some old school hunting stuff, and but yeah, I'm going to do some more filming this year for sure, and yeah, check it out. So,
Dude, I would
uh,
I would love to see any of that old stuff too. I mean your new stuff's already great too, but seeing a young wild Johnny run around out in the outdoors and all the stuff you get into, man, that's primetime TV for me right there.
yeah, it'll be good. So
Yeah.
I gotta get that going. But so yeah, that's it, man.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been a Wild Calling Wednesday. I'm your host Jacob Sklenner. Today we were graced by the big buck killer Johnny Stewart. Johnny, thank you for joining us and telling a bunch of great stories here.
Yeah, no problem, Jake.
All right. Peace out, guys.